Hey everyone, so as you know, my name is Christian, and today we'll be going over cultural competency. What cultural competency is basically being aware of your own cultural beliefs and values and how they may be different from other cultures. Alright everyone, to get started, I'll be using the 6 level continuum of cultural competence to examine myself through reflective practice. The 6 levels can contain cultural destructiveness, cultural incapacity, cultural blindness, cultural pre-competence, cultural competency, and cultural proficiency. So now let's start with cultural destructiveness. From what I found, cultural destructiveness can be seeking to eliminate or be destructive towards another culture. It could also be seen as attitudes, policies, and practices that may be destructive to other cultures. So my thoughts on this level, I'm not one to seek to eliminate or destroy another culture, as I know and believe that people are raised differently and have their own beliefs and cultures that they may follow. And also in our profession, one cannot be destructive towards cultures, as this can usually create a divide between the professionals or between the patients and the professionals that we also work with, so our coworkers. Next, we have cultural incapacity. This is seeking to make the culture of others appear to be wrong and can also be seen as unintentional cultural destructiveness. So, my thoughts, going back to what I said in the cultural destructiveness slide, everyone has their own beliefs with their own culture and what they stand by. With that being said, different cultures and their beliefs cannot appear to be wrong when all of them can be different. There's no right or wrong culture to me, and looking at it that way can also create a divide between you and your patients and may cause conflict if you believe that one's culture can be wrong. Moving on to cultural blindness, this is being unable or refusing to acknowledge the culture of others. It's also seen as the belief that cultures make no difference and that we're all one and the same. While this may be well intentioned, it can be an ethnocentric approach. So moving on to my thoughts, I don't believe I'm at this level within the continuum yet. Although it is not necessarily bad to think this way, one can see this as not truly believing in culture and the differences that they bring within people. This can also get in the way with some people, as many people take pride in their culture and may think badly if someone were to think that their culture is not significant and is seen as the same as everyone else's. All right, next we have cultural pre-competence. This is the realization of weaknesses in working with other cultures and also the acknowledgement of the need to understand and attend to different cultures. It can also be seen as the initial levels of awareness after which a person can move in a positive direction, or they can falter, stop, and possibly regress. So my thoughts, this is a very good step in becoming culturally competent, as those in this level are aware of the understanding needed to appreciate the importance of different cultures. Although they're not yet competent, those within this level attend to patients' different cultures well, but they probably lack the information or skills needed to translate that recognition into behavioral change towards that culture. So next we're moving on to the main topic of our presentation, which is cultural competence. This is seen as the acceptance and respect for differences, the expansion of knowledge, and continual assessment of sensitivity to other cultures. So my thoughts, this is where I believe I fit between pre-competence and this competence level within the continuum, as I do lack the knowledge and information in some cultures, although I have respect and acceptance of all cultures and their different beliefs. Being culturally competent is important to me, especially in a profession like ours, where we may come across a variety of different cultures and backgrounds, people from anywhere around the world. It's also interesting to hear the differences of cultures and how one's upbringing is different or similar to mine, despite being from different cultures or areas. And then lastly, within the 6 level continuum is cultural proficiency. This can be seen as making the commitment to lifelong learning for the purpose of being increasingly effective in serving the educational needs of cultural groups. And it's also seeking to add to knowledge of a certain culture. So my thoughts, the reason I don't believe I belong to this level of cultural competence yet is due to the fact that being culturally proficient is more than just thinking that you are proficient. It's also a little too early for me, in my opinion, to think that I am proficient when there is just a lot more to learn about cultural competency and its effect on our profession, our lives, and also other people around us. All right, everyone. Next, we'll be going into the interview that I conducted using the Purnell's model of cultural competence, which is a model broadly utilized for teaching and studying intercultural competence. It consists of 12 different aspects, with the 12 being overview of heritage, the communication within the culture, family roles and organization, workforce issues, biocultural ecology, high-risk behaviors, nutrition, pregnancy, death rituals, spirituality, healthcare practices, and also healthcare professionals. So starting off with the overview of heritage, the person I chose to interview was my girlfriend, who's originally from Mexico. Had to get me a Latina. Her current residence right now is in Rancho Cordova, which is where she was raised in pretty much all her life since she was a baby. It's also around the Sacramento area, if you don't know where that is. So their reason for emigration was based on her parents, who wanted a better life for themselves and also their children, which is her and her 2 sisters. So based on her heritage and culture, her value on education was based on how she was raised. She explains that school was very important for them. After high school, college was never forced upon them, and they had the option of working straight after, as this seemed common in her culture, especially for the men. Moving on to the 2nd level, which is communication. In her culture, the expectation for communication between children and adults was to always be polite and formal. This included never interrupting her parents, never talking back, and always holding eye contact to show that they were listening. Growing up with parents who did not speak any English, she was raised speaking Spanish at home, but learned English going to school here in the States. When greeting people, the respectful thing was to greet everyone that they met with a handshake or a hug. Along with this handshake or hug, she always addressed her elders with respect as well, using usted to refer them in a respectful and formal manner. She also explained that this was something important to her upbringing and culture, as it showed they were raised correctly and raised to be respectful to others and their elders. Next, we have family roles and organization. So she explained that growing up, family was one of the most important things and consisted of her parents, their children, cousins, uncles and aunts, grandparents, and even her pets were considered family to her. Usually within their culture, she explained that the head of the family is usually the father, who pays for the household and provides its needs to his family. The mothers in her culture are usually ones who care for their children, the household, and the pets. So going into the questions, she had no views on single parenting or childless marriages, although she explained that sexual orientation was a big thing in her culture, especially with men, as there were always expectations of how a man should be. But with times changing, she explains that more parents within her culture are more lenient, but some still have mindsets of the past. And then her views on divorce, this can be seen as frowned upon, as this was seen as a sin, and religion is really important within her culture, which I'll get into a little bit later. Now into workforce issues. So within her culture, the men usually worked while the women would care for the children, as we spoke about in the previous slide. Some issues include many Mexicans that have recently moved here tend to have communication issues with their work, due to them only knowing how to speak Spanish. Uh, they may also have to take roles that are typically opposite of their standard gender roles. An example can be many men end up working in the kitchen, or some women take jobs within warehouse jobs, which um, can be seen more as jobs for men if you look at it that way. Um, Lastly, this they can face less work opportunities and face discrimination because of all these things. Moving on to biocultural ecology. So her culture, as she explains, usually comes from a lot of Indian tribes such as the Mayans or the Aztecs. Um, Within their culture, there's a lot of variation of color, with some being light skin and some being tanner skin, but the majority of people in her culture have tan skin due to the outside labor that many people do and due to the area from which they're from. For their stature, in the Mexican culture, they tend to be more on the shorter side as well. Now, into the high risk behaviors. Um, Usually, the use of alcohol is the only thing that's common in our culture, mostly in the male community. Some use of drugs can be seen within the culture, but she explained that it's mostly the use of alcohol at like family events or just casually. Um, and then she explains the calorie consumption is high as their foods are full of calories, sodium, and oil, which we'll explain in the next slide. She also explains that there isn't really a lack of physical activity, especially in men, due to the fact that a lot of the jobs that people in her culture have is doing heavy labor. Although there is still the flip side, and where many people are also not physically active. And then going on to more high risk behaviors, she says the use of seatbelts is common, while the use of helmets usually isn't. Next, we'll be talking about nutrition and food. So, if you guys know Mexican food, Mexican culture, you know they got some of the best food in the world. She explained that the meaning of food in her culture is to enjoy it with your family and share it with others. She also explains that the food choices usually aren't very healthy, which is probably why it's really good, as they're filled with oil, salt, meat, and lots of calories. She explained that during illness, a variety of warm foods and soups are eaten, such as meatball soup, chicken soup, menudo, and ponche. So now let's talk about pregnancy within her culture. Pregnancy is seen as a new chapter of life and is very important to her family and just any family in general. It's viewed as a milestone, and that when bringing a child into the world, it should be during a time where one is ready, and it should be with their spouse. She explains that it's very important to be married before getting pregnant, as this is a sin in her religion and is considered informal. She also explains the use of prescribed birth control or other methods of contraception is also seen to be frowned upon due to religion purposes. And then birth is usually given in hospitals, although there are still families who do home births with midwives. Moving on to death rituals. So in her culture, they view death as mourning their loss but celebrating the life that they lived. Rituals that are done when a loved one's deceased include doing a rosary for a week in which they pray for the soul of that person. This was pretty interesting to me because in the Philippines we also do something similar. Instead of a week, I believe it's around 9 days. We do a rosary every night for that person, and then also on the 100th day, we do a prayer to send them to heaven. So in the Mexican culture, they also conduct a burial ritual called the levantada, in which they lay out a cross made of flower petals and soil on the floor in front of an altar. The godparents then of the deceased place 5 candles on the cross over the head, arms, feet, and heart. They sing songs and say a prayer before having each family member pick up the petals and the soil from the cross and place it into a pot to plant a new flower or tree as a final goodbye. This is also interesting to me, and I do want to know if you guys do this as well, because I know we do have a lot of people from Mexico as well in our class. So you guys let me know if you guys do this. Next is spirituality, which is very important to this culture. The main religion that you could see within Mexican culture is Catholicism, which is also the main culture in the Philippines as well. So, in her religion, they pray to give thanks for what they have and ask for help in times of need. The practices they may follow are receiving the sacrament baptism, communion, confirmation, and marriage within the church, as well as attending Mass every Sunday and obligation days. Next, we'll be going into healthcare practices within our culture. So, traditional healthcare practices include natural remedies such as drinking teas, taking herbal medicine, and y'all know the use of vapor rub. Many people also use prayers for the ill, believing that God will help them become better. Also, in some cases, people in her culture will go to a person called a curandero, who is supposed to have the gift of healing given by God, using remedies such as oils, herbs, and providing massages to help cure sickness and also pain. On to healthcare practitioners. So she herself does believe in the use of traditional healthcare providers, although in her culture, it is more common for them to try their home remedies first that we explained in the last slide for smaller symptoms like colds or pain. Once it gets more severe, she explained that this is when they will turn to the healthcare providers. She also believes that the gender of the healthcare provider does matter to some people, especially women, as they usually prefer to be seen by other women, as well as mothers prefer that their children are cared for by women as well. She explained that this may be due to the nurturing nature that mothers and women of her culture have. So lastly in this presentation, we'll be talking about how culture can affect us. So the information from this interview can affect the human experience positively by allowing us as PTAs to interact and get to know our patients on a deeper level. By getting to know them better, this also enhances how we treat them, as this can affect our relationship not only professionally but personally as well. The information can also affect the human experience negatively based on the difference in beliefs and cultures. It is hard for people to always agree on the same thing, therefore this can affect the way a person is viewed and interacted with based on their views and how they think. This can also be negative because a person may be passionate in their culture and their beliefs and may be one-sided and not culturally competent. So this concludes the presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you.